Hello, it is I, Dr. Brian Lorgon 111, and welcome back to Z-Tracker, my tracker that I've made for Zelda 1 Randomizer. Last time we went over some nice value-add features of Z-Tracker, including things like blockers, notes, reminders, the timeline, green, yellow, red highlights on the overworld map, and route drawing. And today I'm going to cover more of kind of the extra bonus features of Z-Tracker that other trackers don't have. So to start things off for today, let's talk about helpful hints. In Z1R, some NPCs offer the so-called helpful hints. There's a few different forms to these hints, but the commonest one hints the location of a particular dungeon. For example, you may find an NPC who says, "Aquamentus awaits close to start," which is kind of a cryptic hint that means that Dungeon 1 is near the vanilla starting location. And so to help decode these somewhat cryptic hints, Z-Tracker provides a hint decoder. And so there's a little button over here that says hint decoder. And if I click on it, it brings up this. Each hinted but not yet found location will cause a halo to appear on the Triforce or sword icon in the upper portion of the tracker. Hovering the halo will show the possible locations for that dungeon or sword cave. Yes, we'll talk about that in a moment. So Aquamentus Awaits is just Z1R's code for level 1. And so if we saw Aquamentus Awaits close to start, we would click on here and choose close to start. These are all the different zone locations that we've seen before. And so we can mark up various hints, but the level 1 Triforce is going to get this yellow-green halo. And so if I go ahead and click off of that dialog and go back on the main thing, up here you will see in the upper left that Triforce 1 has this halo. And so that signifies that the tracker knows a hint about Dungeon 1's location. And so this on-screen display serves as a constant reminder that we have information about this dungeon. It's not just hiding somewhere off-screen that we have to remember that it's there. And furthermore, the hint is interactive. If I hover the Triforce icon, then we see this. So all of a sudden, most of the overworld map gets blacked out. And just the area that's close to start, you'll remember we have the zone highlights over here. And so that area near the bottom center is called start. And so the close to start region is the region that's being highlighted here. And so the area with the hints highlighted, the rest of the map's grayed out, and the unmarked tiles that are in that area get colored highlights depending upon whether they're gettable. And since I don't have any items in my inventory right now, there's a couple open caves that are green, but the other things are red. So a more realistic example would be, let's say that I at least have bombs. And so if I have bombs and highlight this area, now all of a sudden another spot lights up green just to the left of start, and one just to the north of start lights up yellow as a spot that might have a location. And so in addition to storing the hint information, Z-Tracker can also synthesize that information into a useful map overlay that can be activated on demand just by hovering your mouse to help pinpoint an unknown dungeon location. And so with that hint, and with a little bit of help from Z-Tracker, I can easily start checking a few of these places. And so let's imagine that I have some bombs and I end up bombing the square right here and discover that this one's Dungeon 1. I'm going to go ahead and mark it up, and let's notice how the tracker's display changes. Most notably in the upper left, Dungeon 1's Triforce icon has changed, and now it has a white numeral rather than the gray numerals of the other dungeon. We talked about this briefly before, but basically the white numeral signifies that a dungeon has been located. So we can easily just at a glance see that Dungeon 1 has been located and none of the other dungeons have been located. And now, if I want to locate Dungeon 1 on the map, once again, I can mouse hover, and I get these crosshairs that show its exact pinpointed known location on the map. And so that's not particularly useful right now since it's the only thing that's marked, but much later in the game when the entire map is filled with different icons as you've been marking up the map, when you're trying to look for Dungeon 1, rather than have to scan all around the map with your eyeballs, you can just hover your mouse over here and boom, the tracker's going to show you, it's going to make it visually pop out so that you can't possibly lose track of where you'd found one of the previous dungeons that you've discovered. So in addition to hovering to find known or hinted dungeon locations, Z-Tracker can also highlight the locations of a number of other things. So let's suppose that we've been walking around the overworld, and along the way, some of the things that we've discovered are shops. So maybe there was a bomb shop here, and a bomb shop here, and a bomb shop here, and a bomb shop here. And maybe we also saw a blue ring shop in a few spots. And so I'm just going to mark a few kind of random blue ring locations around the map as various shops that we've found. And now suppose that we're somewhere in the map up here, and I'm like, oh man, I've run out of bombs. I want to buy more bombs. So where's the nearest bomb shop? Well, I could use my eyeballs to look around the map for these little bomb icons, or I can hover the mouse over bombs. And sure enough, you can see what's highlighted on the map. The 4 bomb shop locations that I have marked on the map get this green highlight, and all the other highlights go away, and so it just makes it jump out at you. Here's the locations of the bomb shop on the map. And similarly, I could do the same thing for blue ring shop. If I hover over the blue ring, then all the blue ring shops that I've already marked on the map get this visual highlight. And so this is just another affordance that Z Tracker gives you in order to easily find things that you've already marked up on the map. The White Sword Cave and the Magical Sword Cave also admit hints and hover locations. And so we might get a clue from an NPC that says, the old man has a book at the grave, or let's say the desert. And so we might get a hint about that. And as a result, if I hover the white sword, it hovers the desert area and shows the possible places we can go there. Maybe as I was walking around and finding different things, I discovered that Sword 3, the Magical Sword Cave, was down here. And I don't have enough hearts to actually pick it up, so I'll need to come back later. And then later, if I've forgotten where it is, I can hover the Magical Sword, and since it knows its exact location, it gives us these crosshairs to pinpoint it on the map. In addition to just displaying locations, sometimes you actually want a route to these locations. And so to help with this, Z-Tracker leverages Link, who appears as an icon up here in the upper right of the tracker. If you click on Link, you can request advice for trying to find a route to a particular location. He's kind of like your GPS. And so let's go through some examples. There's a lot happening on the screen here, but basically with Link, we can click a destination that we want, either a particular tile on the overworld map or other things that we know the locations of. And so let's say, for example, that I finally got 238 rupees or however much costs to buy the blue ring, and I'm like, okay, I want to go buy the blue ring now. Where's the nearest blue ring shop? Well, after clicking on Link, I can click on a blue ring, and in the upper right, Link starts chasing a blue ring icon. And now on my map, wherever my mouse is, it will show me the quickest walking destination in order to get to a blue ring shop. And it does that for the next 10 seconds. And then it reverts back to just kind of like the normal overworld map marks. And so just to see that once again, since I spent a bit of time talking about it, if I have Link chasing the ring, then wherever my mouse is, it's going to draw paths to blue ring shops. And so there's a path going to this blue ring shop over here. If I'm up here, it's drawing this path that tells me I need to come around this way to get to this one being the nearest blue ring shop. Link is able to target ambiguous locations, so I could have Link route me to the area where the white sword is. And so it's this whole area, and so Link will route to all of the gettable locations that I could go to right now. And so we see in the desert, there's only 2 locations that I could potentially open up right now. One is this open cave right here, and the other is this bombable spot right here. And then there's a bunch of places where I would need a candle or the recorder in order to open up those spots. So Link knows about what you currently have and can route you to the potential spots in that location. And so you can see basically the routing marks are taking me to the 2 spots that I can get to in the desert if I'm trying to find the White Sword Cave. And as you probably expect, the routing works in ways that it knows about map topology kind of things. And so, for example, if some of my any roads were here and here, and I asked Link to route me to the blue ring shop when I'm up here, you can see that the path is saying, hey, you should simply walk up to this thing, take this little transport, and then you can go right over here to the blue ring shop. Next up, let's discuss a feature of Z-Tracker that I call overworld map tile accelerators. And let's not bury the lead, let's just immediately get right into it. Here's what happens if I find a take any one you want location, where you would typically take a heart. If I go ahead and click on this, look what happens. The mouse cursor is immediately warped to the center of the screen, and there's a four-way pie menu with the four possible choices you can make when you encounter one of these screens in game. Take any one you want. You can take the potion, you can take the candle, you can take the heart, or you might defer the choice and just walk out of the cave, planning to get some other information before coming back later to actually pick up the thing that you want. And each one of these accelerator tiles shows what side effects are going to happen on the tracker if you choose one of these four menu options here in the pie menu. And so, for example, up top, if we take the candle, it is going to mark off one of the take any hearts. There's only four of them in the world, and if we take the candle instead of taking the heart, it's going to X out that particular heart on the top of the tracker. It is going to darken the overworld map tile that we're currently marking up, the little heart icon on this particular square that I originally activated this whole pop-up from. And if we don't have a candle, it's going to switch things over, marking that we do have a candle. So let's suppose I take the candle in this instance. I click on this. My mouse cursor got immediately warped back to the square I activated it from. And so we're down here. You can see the heart is darkened, which means we don't need to return here because we've already taken what's in this cave. And up top, one of the take any hearts has been X'd out, and it now shows that I have obtained the candle. So rather than discovering that there is this cave here, marking the spot, moving the mouse up here, marking out the thing, moving the mouse up here, marking the candle, and then bringing the mouse back down, instead I was able to do all of that just from an accelerator that pops up when I actually just mark the tile for whatever's on this particular square of the overworld. And just as a reminder, like, one of the main goals of the tracker is to reduce mousing as much as possible. The player is holding a game controller in their hand and trying to play a video game, and so you don't want to have your hand on the mouse very much. And so this makes it so you're on the tile that you're on, you select the thing that you're marking up, and then immediately you can just move a little bit to the left, up, right, or down, and it will take care of all of the remaining actions for you, rather than having to mouse all around and look at the tracker and then get your mouse back to where you were. Your attention can stay, for the most part, on the game. And so there's a variety of overworld map tiles that have similar accelerators. And so let's just go through them. There is the Wood Sword Cave, where in Randomizer, you have the option of taking the candle or taking the sword. At this point, I already have the candle, and so presumably I would end up taking the sword. So we'll go ahead and do that, and it marks up the wood sword and darkens the Wood Sword Cave because there's no reason for me to come back here. I've already taken the item out of it. Let's see. There is the White Sword Cave that we were looking for before. Suppose that we found the White Sword Cave. It has a key item in it that an old man will give you. And so let's imagine that the White Sword Cave had, I don't know, the magical boomerang. And so rather than, when I find the White Sword Cave, having to mouse up to the top and say that I got the magical boomerang and mouse back down, instead you saw what happened when we highlighted this thing. It just immediately gave me the item box right where my mouse already is on the map, along with an arrow that kind of clearly marks that this is whatever changes you make here are going to be changes to the white sword item at the top of the tracker. And yeah, and so we could just mark things up. And now I've already taken the item out of the White Sword Cave, and so it turns dark as well. The coast item behaves similarly, and so this is a fixed location on the map. It's always that there's a key item sitting off the coast, and once you get the ladder, you'll be able to obtain it. You might just be walking around before you have the ladder and witness what item is there and want to mark it on the tracker, and so I can interact with the item box over here, and if, for example, it was the any key, I could right-click on it to say, I don't have this item, but that's what it is, and now it's marked on the map. And then later on, when you do have the ladder, I'd just be able to left-click over here as I'm walking by and mark that I picked up the any key, for example. And then the final one is Armos. There are 5 Armos locations on the map. One of them I've actually already marked off as a Boo Ring shop, but you can see the other 4 highlighted when I hover the Armos. And so of these 5 Armos locations, which are the robots that you can push and they move out of the way, 4 of them would reveal an entrance to something like the Boo Ring shop or some other just cave entrance on the overworld, but one of them will be hiding a key item. So suppose on this particular screen, I push one of the Armos robots and he has a key item. I can mark it as Armos item, and immediately I'm in this accelerator where it does an item pop-up. It shows that this is going to modify the Armos item on the top of the tracker. And so if he was hiding the power bracelet, I can click on the power bracelet and boom, power bracelet appears as a gotten item over here. And this tile gets a grayed out Armos icon saying that I don't need to come back here. This is where I got the Armos item. So in all those cases, the player finds a location. The very next thing they would typically do is mark stuff on the top of the tracker, and Z-Tracker is just going to save you time by providing a pop-up right there wherever your mouse is to mark up the things without hardly any mouse movement. So since I've made a number of marks on this overworld map at this point, let's move on to talking about the spot summary. So there's the text spot summary in the upper right, and if I hover that text, it brings up this remaining location summary. And basically, these are all of the locations that you could find in the overworld, and the ones that you've already found are grayed out. And so it kind of like shows your marks versus the marks that could exist on this entire overworld. And so, for example, some people like to count the door repair charges to help manage their rupees, keep track of if they're trying to buy something. What's the likelihood the next cave I bomb open is going to steal some of my money as a door repair charge? And so Z-Tracker will happily count that for you. And so let's imagine that I've already found some door repair charges. And so let's mark up a few of them on the map. So let's imagine I found a door repair charge here and here and here and here. Just kind of willy-nilly marking some of these. I think I just marked 6 of them. And so if we re-hover the spot summary now, in the third pane, the non-unique locations, there are in First Quest Mixed Overworld, which is what I'm playing, there are 9 door repair charges, and 6 of them I've already marked, and so 3 of them are still outstanding somewhere on the map. And so it's not very likely that the next cave I bomb open is going to take my money, so I can probably feel good about bombing open a few more caves while I'm holding on to a bunch of rupees, hoping to buy something in the future. And this is true for basically all the things that you're marking up. And so if you find some potion shops, if I mark up a few of those, and I hover the spot summary, it shows that I have 4 of the potion shops. There's still 3 potion shops out there in the world that I could find at some point in the future. And so this is just a nice way to keep track of what remains if you're diligently marking kind of all these different things. Many players may prefer just to mark don't care spots rather than marking up every spot on the map. Some people don't care about the door repair charges, and so when they see one, they'll just left click, don't care, left click, don't care. And in that case, the spot summary won't be as valuable because you're never going to mark off all the things. But yeah, its utility depends on which spots you reliably mark versus which ones that you ignore. So just kind of jumping around again, there's a few features of the dungeon map that I didn't cover a couple episodes ago, so let's go ahead and talk about those now. One is middle-clicking dungeon rooms. We've already seen how you can mark a prize item in a dungeon room. I could go through the pop-ups, or I could just use a hotkey. So for example, I could hit T in order to mark this room as a Triforce to see it a little bit bigger. There's its icon. And so maybe I see that the Triforce is in this room, but I'm still looking for a key item in this dungeon, and so I'm going to leave the Triforce behind and explore a couple rooms nearby, trying to find a key item that I'm looking for. And maybe once I find that item, then I'm going to go back and pick up the Triforce. And so if you want to mark that you've picked up a prize item, a floor drop out of a dungeon room, you can use middle click. So right now the Triforce is kind of a bright orange, and if I middle click, it gets grayed out. And so you can see the brightness just change with a toggle with the middle click. And so that's a way to denote items that are on the floor versus items that you've already picked up off of the floor. Alternatively, if you're using hotkeys, like you might just choose to mark and unmark the item. And so, for example, I could just hit T to toggle whether or not the Triforce appears in this room. And so the middle click is kind of an affordance for people who are going through, the actual mouse menus in order to mark that there's the Triforce in this room, for example, and then mark it again later that it's no longer there if you don't have hotkeys mapped. And I should note, by the way, that the dungeon markings don't carry any semantics for the tracker. The player is free to mark up as much or as little as they like, just whatever helps you in terms of remembering what you need to do. And so a number of players won't mark off the Triforce because they'll just remember, or perhaps they'll have the compass so that they can see in game exactly where the Triforce room is. But if you want to mark this up, the Z-Tracker provides an affordance to do so. Similarly, for rooms that don't have floor drop markings, any icons in the bottom right, if you middle click those rooms, it just adds a little yellow, I'll call it a circle. It's kind of a very dashed line circle around the room that just kind of calls it out. And if you middle click again, it just toggles it back off. And you can use these for whatever purpose you see fit. You can put them on unmarked rooms as well. And so yeah, it's just an ad hoc mark that the player can use however they like. And so personally, I rarely actually mark up the rooms with the various prize drop icons that are over here. And instead, what I typically do, almost all of the things that you can pick up in a room, I would choose to immediately pick up if I could. One of the rare cases where I don't is bomb packs. Sometimes you're already full up on bombs and you discover a room that drops a bomb pack. Rather than go through a little bit more cumbersome markup interface to say that there's a bomb pack in this room, instead I might just middle click the room as my own personal mark that says, okay, I left a bomb pack here. And then I might go explore some other rooms and try bombing various walls in order to find some more rooms in the dungeon. And now that I've used some bombs and actually need to pick more up, then I might go back to this room, pick up the bomb pack, mark off that I picked it up, and continue on through the dungeon. But again, these are just, it's a mark, it's a mark that you can place on the map, and you can use it however you see fit. And just another example of how you might use this mark when you're going through the final dungeon, Dungeon 9. There's rooms where you might hear Ganon in an adjacent room, and so you might want to mark, for example, the places that Ganon might be because you've heard him screaming from an adjacent room, or you might mark where you think Zelda is going to be based on what you've seen with shutter doors. So while we're looking at dungeon rooms, well, I usually prefer to play the Randomizer's Shapes dungeon option. Shapes is where each dungeon has a randomly generated map shape. Some folks prefer to play Zelda 1 Randomizer using the vanilla dungeon layouts from Zelda's first quest or second quest. And to help with those fixed known maps, Z-Tracker provides the FQ and SQ checkboxes in the upper right of the dungeon tab. And so suppose I'm in Dungeon 4, but I'm actually playing non-Shapes dungeons. I can click FQ to show the first quest map. In First Quest Dungeon 4 in the vanilla game, it's shaped like a snake, shaped like one of the in-game rope is the name of the enemy that's kind of a little snake who runs around on the floor. Or Second Quest, I can click on SQ, and in that case it's like the letter D was the shape of Dungeon 4 and Second Quest. And so you can instantly get one of those maps or click the box again to toggle it off. If you're playing with these kind of known map layouts as a randomizer option rather than the randomized shape layouts. Sometimes when you're playing Z1R, you might choose not to map a dungeon, especially some of the smaller dungeons like dungeons 1, 2, and 3, just kind of expecting to cruise through it all really quickly. So suppose I'm in Dungeon 2 and I haven't been mapping and I go through a bunch of rooms and then all of a sudden I encounter a hard blocker. Maybe there is a dig dogger in this room and I don't have the recorder and I want to make a note of it. And so I might go ahead and put a dig dogger icon in this room. But then at that point, since I'm going to want to come back, I might look at my in-game minimap and decide to paint out the existing map that I've already explored. And I mean, you could just go back and click on all the rooms in order to try to mark it up. But that takes a little bit of time, and so Z-Tracker offers an affordance for quickly painting out a set of rooms, which is click and drag. And so I could do this, if that was the path I had taken through the dungeon, just dragging my mouse cursor. And now as a result, it just quickly kind of like paints out all those rooms up to the one where I got into a hard block and decided I was going to exit the dungeon and have to come back. And somewhat similarly, in some Z1R flag sets, the book the key item, is given an additional power of being an atlas. That is a set of maps for every dungeon. So that means when you first walk into the dungeon, you can already see the map of that dungeon in-game on your minimap. And so sometimes when that happens, you might want to draw out what the dungeon shape looks like to know the set of rooms that you're going to clear. And so rather than click and drag, you can right click and drag in order to paint out the dungeon. So imagine I just walked into level 3 and I have the book atlas, which means I already have the map. So I could look at the mini map that's on screen and then try to paint out exactly what it looks like with rooms that I'm going to need to complete in my own map, and just try to match up the same shape. And then in order to kind of check my work, it can be easy when you're just trying to transcribe the in-game map into kind of your own dungeon map of rooms that you plan to clear. You can easily make a mistake. And so there's this little thing, these little blue boxes, that's a hover target for the mouse. And it shows a projection of what you have drawn as it would appear on the in-game minimap. And so this makes it easy to just kind of check your work and look and see if the thing that you drew looks like what's in the upper left-hand corner of the actual Legend of Zelda screen that shows the mini-map for the dungeon. And so that just helps prevent some errors by giving you some kind of double check to see if it looks correct. And so then once you've painted out the map, then you can start clearing it. Like if this were the start room, I can just start going through the rooms and marking the ones that I was going into, and maybe there's a locked door down here, and maybe this room has a bunch of hard monsters, and so I'm not going to clear this room yet, and instead I'm going to continue up this way. And then we can see the progress that we're making through the dungeon, and which rooms we've actually been through and cleared versus which rooms we still need to go back to and clear out in order to fully visit all the rooms in this dungeon. This painting out the map technique works well for small dungeons. For Dungeon 9, it's typically enormous, and so rather than paint out the map of almost all of the rooms, you can do the opposite, which is just to mark off the empty holes in the map. There's a special room called Off the Map. I have it mapped to a hotkey, and so I'm going to press Z as my hotkey in order to mark the rooms that are off the map. You can also triple right-click a room, which is right-click, and then completed versus uncompleted room. It doesn't make sense, the distinction between a completed room and an uncompleted room for an unmarked room, which is the current tile state. And so right-clicking an unmarked room just marks it as off the map if you're using things with the mouse rather than using as a hotkey. And so we can basically look at the map and say, okay, it had these 6 holes or whatever, and just, I guess I marked 6 holes. Mark off those holes, and the way that the off-the-map room is displayed is basically as a black room that also grays out the nearby doors. And so now if we walked into level 9 over here, we would immediately know that we can't go to the north because that's off the map, but maybe we could go these directions, and it just helps you quickly have a map that corresponds to where you know the rooms are based on your own in-game minimap. One more feature of the dungeon rooms is that sometimes you'll paint out a bunch of rooms in the dungeon as you've been going through and clearing them, and then all of a sudden you'll discover that you've marked things up in the wrong column. You'll get the map, see the whole layout of the dungeon, and realize, oops, I thought I was coming in the 3rd column, in the column under the V with a level V, or level 4. But it turns out that I was off by a column, and actually I need to shift this whole thing over to the left. You could try to correct all of your marks and duplicate them over here and remark them. But since that's a common mistake to make, there is a cut and paste option. It's labeled grab up here in the upper right. If I grab, it gives some instructions. They're a little bit cut off in this projection. But basically, you can take entire segments of rooms that are connected to one another and click on that segment, and then pick it up and move it elsewhere in the dungeon. So in this case, if it was off by 1 column and it actually should have been over here, I can move it over here and drop it there. It's not getting captured by OBS, but there's a little pop-up window that says, you moved a dungeon segment. Keep these changes, and you can either click keep changes or undo. I'm going to say keep changes. And basically we just cut and pasted. We picked up that segment and moved it over to the left. And if there had been a different segment, for example, if there had been a transport staircase over here, you can grab individual segments at a time And so I can move these rooms where these rooms that are disconnected from those don't move. And so sometimes when you make an error in your mapping, this will help you. There are other times where you make such a mess of the map that even this tool isn't going to help. But this is a very common error that people make. And so having the ability to just kind of cut and paste and move things, up or down a column or left or right a row is often a very useful thing to be able to do. Switching gears again, while hotkeys are very convenient for marking up the overworld map, some people play video games without a keyboard right in front of them, and so hotkeys might not be a very good option for them. And Z-Tracker offers another way to mark the overworld map using speech recognition. I'm going to need to restart the tracker to enable that feature, so give me a moment here. All right, so in the options menu, there is an option called Listen for Speech that I have checked at startup. And so now I can hover an overworld tile and say things like tracker set bomb shop, tracker set level 2, tracker set potion shop, tracker set sword 3, and basically mark up all the different overworld tiles on the map using my voice. The speech recognition isn't perfect, but it's pretty good. It's just stuff that's built into Windows that I'm using, and there's just a name for each tile on the overworld that you would speak, and you preface it with tracker set as kind of the wake-up phrase so that it knows to listen to your voice as opposed to just the rambling that I'm doing right now. You still need to move your mouse in order to hover the tiles, but this is a way to quickly mark up the map with no keyboard in sight and your hands mostly on the game controller most of the time. So just another option that Z-Tracker provides. For those who do use the mouse, I think I neglected to point out that Z-Tracker is smart about not letting you mark the same thing twice. So suppose I'd already found the first 4 dungeons. Let's go ahead and just mark them up with the mouse over here. I can't mark them anywhere else again. So for example, if I'm over here and I pull up the pop-up and I try to mark Dungeon 2, you'll notice that there's a red box around Dungeon 2 and I can't click on it. It knows that Dungeon 2 already exists somewhere else on the map, and this is something that there should only be one of in the entire map. And so it doesn't let you do that. Similarly, if I use the scroll wheel is going to scroll right past the options that are unavailable because they've already been used up. And so you can see that it's didn't call this out before, but it's scrolling past the Armos item because I'm not currently on an Armos screen. The tracker knows that there's only 5 screens where you can mark up the Armos item. And so if I try to scroll past Armos over here, it won't let me. It won't let me click on Armos over here. But if I'm on this screen, then Armos is legal value. And I could click over here in order to mark up the Armos item because that screen actually does have an Armos robot that we could push. Yeah, and similarly, the speech recognition, we'll see if it fails over into another state. Tracker set level 2. Tracker set level 2. Yeah, it's correctly not marking the tile because it knows that level 2 is already marked up elsewhere. The speech recognition only works on the overworld. I have not worked on context-sensitive speech recognition for being able to mark items or dungeon rooms or things like that. But with the items, the same kind of thing applies in terms of not letting us erroneously mark that we got, the boomerang or the bow in 2 different locations. I've already marked the bow on my item tracker down here, and so if I try to mark it again, it's going to show up in red and not let me mark it up. And so that's once again just trying to design to prevent errors. Another example of that type of error prevention is in the dungeon tracker. And so there's transport staircases that are part of a matched pair. And so if I'd gone in here and gotten transport 1, and transport 1 ended up coming out over here, if I go and try to mark transport 1 again, it's grayed out. There's a red box. I can't click on it. We can't say that we found a third transport 1 staircase because they're a matched pair. There's only 2 of them. And so that's an example of a room that you can only place twice inside a dungeon. Once again, just trying to prevent errors. Maybe you were trying to mark transport 2 but accidentally clicked on the wrong thing, well, it won't let you click on the wrong thing in that instance. And I think those are maybe all of the instances of things along those lines. But in general, if there's some kind of pop-up menu where there's a finite number of uses for one of the things, like 2 of each transport, then once you've used up that finite number of uses, the tool will try to prevent you from using it again. There is still more to show. For example, I haven't shown the startup options and the start screen and some of the features that are there, like hide dungeon numbers, which is actually a pretty in-depth feature in terms of supporting a particular randomizer flag. But those are things that we can talk about in a future video. For now, I'm going to say I hope, as always, that you all are having a great day, and I'll see you again soon with more on Z Tracker. For now, bye-bye.